Xiaomi Mi 11, Pixel 4a 5G. Is Xiaomi's 108 megapixel camera enough to compete with Google's computational photography? Let's find out. How's it going, Grant here? Welcome back to the channel. It's another video and another camera comparison. So if you're familiar with how I do these comparisons, welcome back. But if you're new to the channel, I tend to like to show you as much footage from the cameras as possible to help you decide which of these two camera systems might be best for you. So I'll show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions. And we've got the Xiaomi Mi 11 today up against the Pixel 4a 5G. And the Mi 11 packs that 108 megapixel main sensor, and the Pixel 4a 5G tends to use the same 12 megapixel cameras that Google has used in its previous Pixel models. So we've got raw hardware with the Xiaomi up against Google's computational photography software in the Pixel 4a 5G. Which one's going to hold up? Which one will win? Which one will you prefer? Let's go ahead and take a look at the photos and videos and find out. So we're in the park testing the video on the Xiaomi Mi 11 and the Pixel 4a 5G. This is the main lens on each, starting at 1080p, 30 frames per second. And starting out, at least in the viewfinder, the shadows in the trees over here are a little bit darker on the Mi 11 than what I'm seeing here on the 4a 5G. And the 4a 5G is probably looking a little bit more realistic to what I'm seeing with my eyes. At least that's what I see through the viewfinder here. I'll just pan around so you can see what these lenses look like here compared to each other. And I'll go ahead and pan over here to the right and we'll test zoom out. So let's go ahead and tap to a 2x digital there on the 4a 5G, and we can go into 2x here on the Mi 11. And I can go up to a 5x digital zoom there on the Pixel, and we can go all the way up to a max 6x digital there on the Mi 11. So again, at least what I'm seeing through the viewfinder, the Pixel looks a little bit clearer, but they both look pretty stable, at least to my eye here. And let's move out on the Pixel and back out here on the Mi 11. Let's get back into 1x here. And there we go. So let's go ahead and test focus here on the post with the Mi 11 first. And it's going to be a little bit more finicky from what I notice. Let's go here and see. Tapped. There we go. Away. And let's try focus. There you go. So if you get the distance right, it'll focus up pretty quick with the Mi 11. Otherwise, tap the focus and it should get you there like that. And now with the Pixel, and that focus is right up. So autofocus a little bit better here on the Pixel. And we'll go ahead and test stabilization here as we walk down the stairs. And so both of these should be doing pretty well as far as stabilization and 1080p here. Of course, let me know if you're seeing any kind of a difference. And I'll go ahead and stop here and pan up into the sky to see how these cameras handle that bright afternoon sunlight. So we're back with the same test, this time in 4K, 30 frames per second on each phone here. And I'll pan around a little bit so you can see the differences on each of these lenses here in 4K. Pan down and up, and again, at least in the viewfinder, the shadows are looking a little bit more lifted here on the Mi 11 than it did in 1080p. But of course, right there, when adjusted for that exposure, it's a little bit darker than the Pixel. But anyway, we'll just go ahead and pan over here to the right and test zoom again. So tap to get to 2x on the Pixel, and we can move into 2x here on the Mi 11. And full 5x digital zoom there on the Pixel, still looking pretty clear and very steady in the viewfinder here. And we'll move all the way into max 6x digital zoom there on the Mi 11. So we'll go ahead and back out on the Pixel, and we'll go ahead and move it back out on the Mi 11 as well. So let's go ahead and test autofocus here in 4K. So let's see if I can get the distance right on the Mi 11. Not quite wanting to focus up, but let's go ahead and tap, and it focused up. So focus away, and there we go, focused up again. One more time. Let's go ahead and tap, and it refocuses. So a little bit finicky again with the Mi 11, and Pixel nice and snappy still here in 4K with the autofocus, looking good. So let's go ahead and test stabilization, this time in 4K. Again, walk down the stairs and through this pathway here. And again, they're both stabilized at 4K, so this should still be looking fairly good. And again, we'll stop and pull up here and pan up to see how each of these cameras handle that bright afternoon sunlight in 4K. Hey everyone, so here's some footage from the front-facing cameras on the Mi 11 and the Pixel 4a 5G. This is at 1080p, 30 frames per second, which is the max resolution and frame rate on each. Obviously, I'm outdoors here and I wanted to start out in some shade because that's even lighting and probably the most optimal conditions. So this is about as good as you can see the front-facing camera do here outdoors. But as I pan around here, you'll start to see the light get a little bit tougher behind me there. And you can see what that does to the image quality and the sky behind me there. And I'll keep panning around so you can see what this looks like with some of the changing lighting conditions here. The light's coming in front of me right now, and we'll just go ahead and start walking to test the stabilization. So let me know what you think of the front-facing cameras here on the Mi 11 and the Pixel 4a 5G. Hey everyone, so here's a quick low light test here on the Mi 11 and the Pixel 4a 5G. This is 1080p, 30 frames per second. And as you can see, it's a pretty well lit situation here, or at least decently lit. I can point up at that really bright street light to see how each of these phones handle that bright light. And in the viewfinder, the Mi 11 is definitely flaring that out a lot more than the Pixel is. But pretty much any phone is going to do that. It's just to what degree, because it's such an intense light there. But again, Mi 11 definitely flaring that out quite a bit more. And I'll go ahead and pan around this way. And we'll start walking to test the stabilization and also test out how these phones handle a light transition here from that fairly well lit area to a much darker area here around the corner. So as you walk further, it's gonna get much darker. Also pay attention to the stabilization, see if you see any kind of micro jitters, which happens in darker situations. And at least in the viewfinder, the Pixel 4a 5G is definitely brighter, and depending on how you like to see your image, that's either a good or a bad thing. Some may prefer to see a brighter looking video image so they can see more of what they're shooting. Other people may want it to look closer to life, even if that means darker here. So again, the viewfinder, at least the Mi 11 is looking more like what I'm seeing to my eye, and the Pixel is definitely brightening up that image a lot more. We'll see how it looks like in post. And of course, when you do that, the Pixel 4a 5G definitely has a little bit more noise as a result of that. And I'll pan up here into the night sky, and again, the Mi 11 to the viewfinder is retaining that darkness, although it's a little bit darker than what I'm seeing with my eye. And the Pixel 4a 5G is definitely brighter with quite a bit of noise there. And I'll pan over here to the left where there's a bit more light, so you can see what that looks like here on each of these phones in 1080p. Everyone, so we're back with the same test, this time in 4K 30 frames per second on each phone. Again, I'll pan over here so you can see what this looks like here out in some fairly well-lit situation here with all these lights. And I'll go ahead again and pan up into that bright street light there. And the Mi 11 definitely still flaring that out more than the Pixel. And we'll pan down this way and around here again so you can see what the image quality looks like in this lighting situation. And again, I'll pan over this way and we'll start walking to test stabilization again, this time in 4K obviously, as well as to see how it handles light transition from that brighter area to this darker area, as 4K tends to be darker than the 1080p footage that you just saw, so pay attention to that. And once again, at least to the viewfinder, the Pixel 4a 5G definitely looking brighter, but certainly at the cost of some noise here, as well as bluer tinted skies, which you don't see too much on the Pixels. They tend to have corrected that blue sky issue, but at least to the viewfinder, it's looking kind of bluish, not nearly as dark as I'm seeing with my eye, while the Mi 11 definitely is retaining that darkness. I'll pan up into the night sky so you can see what I'm talking about here. We actually have a few stars, if you can see that, a few twinkles. And the Mi 11 is still looking darker than what I'm seeing with my own eyes. And the Pixel 4a 5G is definitely looking much brighter, much noisier. So what I'm seeing with my own eyes and what's true to life is somewhere between these two phones. And I'll pan over here to the left so you can see what that looks like with a little bit more light here with 4K. And again, Mi 11 is definitely looking darker than what I'm seeing here, and certainly a good amount of noise here on the Pixel 4a 5G. But there's a video sample here in 4K. Don't stop now. Everyone, so let's wrap this comparison up with some video from the front-facing camera here at night. And this is at 1080p, 30 frames per second. That is the max resolution and frame rate on each of these front-facing cameras here. And even though it's at night, obviously I'm in a bit of a fairly good lighting condition here with all these lights around me. Just wanted to give you a sample of what it looks like here. You can see those same bright lights in the background, and the front-facing camera is definitely handling that better than what I saw with the rear-facing cameras. And so let's go ahead and start walking to test stabilization. And at the same time, just like we did with the rear-facing cameras, I'll start walking over into a darker area here so you can see what happens as the light transitions from this fairly well-lit area to a much darker situation. You can see how these front cameras handle that lighting. And as I walk here, you'll hear a fountain to my right. So we'll test the audio as well to see how it holds up against the background noise of that fountain. And again, you can see it's a much darker area here. But if I pan around this way, you can see a bunch of those street lights behind me. And again, I think these front-facing cameras are handling it a little bit better than the rear, although this time the Pixel front-facing cameras are flaring that out a bit more than the Mi 11s. But I'll go ahead and back over here so you can end this video in a darker situation here so you can compare that on each of these phones. So let me know what you think. of the camera performance here on the Mi 11 up against the Pixel 4a 5G. Which one did you like? Which one did you prefer? Leave a comment down below and let's continue our conversation down there. And as always, thanks for watching.